Before we dive in, I feel it's important to put a face to a name, to humanize this course a little. I'd like to introduce myself and share more about my story and my why. My name is Joe, and I'm a recovering gambling addict with over a year of clean time. I've been through inpatient, PHP, IOP, DBT, and still attend GA weekly while maintaining additional therapy sessions 2 to 3 times a week. And what I noticed throughout all of that is that most professionals, therapists, caseworkers, entire treatment programs, family members even, are years behind when it comes to understanding how gambling works today. Most don't know what a parlay is. They don't know that clients can cash out mid-game. They've never heard of same-game parlays, live bets, or micro bets. Even how options trading plays a role in this, and most importantly, they don't understand gambling culture and the strength that it has. And because of that, clients walk into therapy feeling like they're speaking a completely different language. I created this course to change that. I didn't start gambling in a chaotic way. I'd been to casinos before, played some blackjack, slots, nothing out of control. The problem didn't really start until I was introduced to my first bookie. Because back then, sports betting wasn't legal in Illinois, so you had to go through a bookie. And the thing about bookies is that you gamble on credit. So you settle up at the end of the week, win or lose, but you don't have to put money up front. At first, it was a fun way to stay engaged with college football, but the second I started making real money at work, the bets got bigger. I'd bet one game, then two, then an entire slate from 11 a.m. till the Hawaii game at midnight. And then I'd wake up and do it all over again on NFL football. And that was just the weekends. I'd win and double down. I'd lose and chase. That became the pattern. I'd say, let me just win it back. And the next thing I know, I was down 5 figures trying to break even. Eventually, I was betting with 5 different bookies. When one account was tapped out, I'd just start with another. And when sports betting became legal in Illinois, I thought maybe it would actually help me. There was no more chasing a guy for payouts, no more waiting until Monday to settle. But I was wrong. I took the same behaviors to the sports betting apps, only now I could deposit and withdraw instantly. I started betting on anything: minor league tennis, overseas basketball, teams whose names I can't even pronounce and don't know where they are. There were days I had 3 phones open, streaming games in Asia just to get to 9 a.m. at work, then bet all day until midnight. It didn't matter what the sport was, I just needed action. And still, I told myself it wasn't a problem. There were so many times I tried to quit. I'd delete the apps, I'd self-exclude, I'd use gambling blockers, but I always knew that I'd be back. I'd just sign up on a new site or go across state lines or use a VPN. The tools that were supposed to help me gamble responsibly felt more like a legal checkbox than something that actually worked. I wasn't quitting, I was just pausing until the next dopamine hit or until I could get access to some money. I'd convinced myself I was managing it, but deep down I was completely out of control. Eventually, I lost everything: money, confidence, direction, my career. I was borrowing from friends and family, taking out payday loans, maxing credit cards. I didn't even realize it at the time, but I was also severely depressed. I wake up exhausted no matter how much sleep I got. I stopped eating, I lost weight. I thought about ending my life more than once, and the scary part is I actually had a plan. That was the moment I knew I needed help. Yet it still didn't stop me. I didn't know how to ask for help. I was too insecure. I thought I'd be cut off from my family for lying and whatever other excuse I told myself. Even when I had a plan to end my life, that still would not stop me. Frankly, the reason I ended up stopping was because I got found out. The web of lies and missing money were a house of cards waiting to collapse. And that's the real problem. I'm thankful every day that I got caught, and honestly, when I was gambling, I wish it had happened much sooner. I went to inpatient treatment and was diagnosed with depression and gambling addiction. And while the support helped save my life, I also noticed something troubling. No one really understood gambling, and not just sports betting. I mean modern gambling or gambling culture. Not the therapist, not the psychiatrist, not the intake team, not even the curriculum. I would sit in group therapy and barely speak because I felt so isolated that nobody would understand what a live prop bet is or what cashing out meant. I did most of my processing at night with my roommate, who I still keep in touch with to this day. That's when I realized how massive the gap is between modern gambling and traditional addiction training. Again, that's why this course exists. This course isn't about teaching treatment techniques. It's about helping you understand what gambling actually looks like in 2025. It's about recognizing the language your clients use, understanding the ways they hide their addiction, and being prepared with questions and tools that reflect the reality of online gambling. It's the kind of insight you can't get from a textbook. It's the insight you can only get from lived experience, and not just my own, but from the 400 plus members in my Discord community, the messages I receive daily on social media, which, by the way, can be a pretty dangerous place for someone, You'd think I'd have a ton of well-wishers and support, which I do get a lot of, but mostly private because this issue is so isolating. But a majority of the public comments are, "You're only one win away from the big one. You're a quitter. Gambling addiction isn't real. Stop blaming other people because you don't have discipline and self-control." Gambling culture is a huge issue in and of itself. I know I'm fortunate to have had the treatment and support that saved my life, but many people don't get that same opportunity. They go to GA meetings and feel out of place. They talk to therapists who don't understand modern gambling, and they're constantly told to just stop betting. I believe it's what more providers need if we're going to keep up with this wave of gambling addiction that is only going to get worse. This course is designed to fill that gap and provide you with the knowledge and tools you need to truly understand what's happening with today's gamblers. I'm grateful to be here and to share this with you. I hope that my story resonates and that you can take what you've learned and use it to make a difference in your own practice and in the lives of those who need help. Welcome to Understanding Gambling Addiction, a guide for families. My name's Joe, and I'm here to walk you through what gambling addiction really looks like in today's world, a world I lived in for a very long time. If you're here, there's a good chance you love someone who's caught in it, and you're probably feeling confused, frustrated, maybe even helpless. This course was built for you. My goal is to help you see what's really going on, not just the behaviors, but the mindset underneath. Because until you understand how they think, nothing they do is going to make sense at all. I also want to mention this because I know my parents ask themselves every day still, what did they do wrong? The answer is nothing. You didn't ask to be thrown into this chaos, and you didn't create this chaos. Frankly, most of you are literal victims, whether it be from theft or emotional abuse, and I understand you're tired, and I'm sorry for that. But I hope you find a little solace in understanding the mind of a gambler. Now, this presentation certainly has a sports betting lean, but whether it's sports betting, crypto casinos, online casinos, or even options trading, they're just different chapters of the same book. Over the next hour or so, we'll explore how gambling has evolved, especially with online platforms and sports betting apps that make it accessible 24/7. You'll learn how these platforms are engineered to be addictive, how they keep people hooked, and why quitting isn't as simple as just stop. We'll also look closely at the psychology behind the addiction, how a gambler justifies things, what they hide, what they fear, and why the lies feel so personal. This course won't give you all the answers, but it will give you clarity. And sometimes clarity is what breaks the cycle. I want to be clear. I'm not here to give you therapy advice or clinical treatment strategies. I'm not a licensed professional. What I bring is lived experience. Somebody who has been through every level of care, including inpatient treatment all the way down to outpatient therapy, and I still go to GA meetings. And I've also talked to hundreds of families going through the same thing you are. Gambling addiction doesn't just affect the person placing bets. It affects everyone around them. You deserve answers, you deserve peace, and this course is here to help you get both. Let's begin. It's easy to think that addiction is just about behavior, about stopping the gambling, ending the cycles of loss and regret. But understanding what's going on in the gambler's mind is essential. Addiction isn't just about money, it's about the emotions, the thought patterns, and the underlying psychological drivers. Knowing this isn't just important for therapists or clinicians or family, it's crucial for anyone who wants to understand and help someone with gambling addiction. Family members and peers who aren't in a treatment role need to know this just as much as the healthcare providers so that they can relate to these behaviors and so they don't unintentionally enable them or become frustrated by the cycle of promises and relapses. Gambling isn't what it used to be. It's faster, quieter, and it's exploding. Online apps and platforms have transformed gambling from an occasional activity into a constant, accessible presence. Today's gambling experience is designed to be frictionless, immersive, and available 24/7 right in your pocket. In 2024, Americans wagered nearly $150 billion on sports. That's almost a 24% increase in a single year. Revenue from sports betting alone, over $13.7 billion. And state governments collected almost $3 billion in taxes from that. That's money being lost by people. And for a growing number of them, it's not just entertainment, it's destruction. Problem gambling helpline calls in Virginia rose 973% from 2019 to 2023. New Jersey saw a 277% increase. This isn't an isolated issue, it's a public health crisis. A 2023 Rutgers study found that 6% of adults in New Jersey are at high risk for problem gambling. That's nearly 1 in 17 people and 3 times higher than the national average of 1 to 2%. There's also massive demographic disparities. The rates are significantly higher for men under 25, and gambling disproportionately impacts Black and Hispanic populations. And lastly, there's a higher prevalence among low income residents. Globally, the World Health Organization now recognizes gambling disorder as a public health concern. In Europe, countries are already acting. Some, like Belgium, have banned gambling ads entirely. The UK has restrictions on gambling advertisements during sports, and Norway has state-sponsored gambling monopolies with strict limits. And even some of the EU has banned microbetting altogether. Microbetting, if you're not familiar, is the act of betting on single plays, like the next pitch, the next foul ball, or even the speed of the pitch. It's not just a bet, it's a dopamine slot machine in your pocket, because bets only take seconds to settle, like the spin of a slot machine or a roulette wheel. Here's the scale of the problem. The US gambling industry pulled in over $71 billion last year. Meanwhile, consumers, real people, lost over $100 billion. And very little of that went to support services or prevention. Currently, there's no federal funding for gambling support services like there is for other addictions, and states are just starting to realize the issue. And frankly, they're scrambling and in catch-up mode. Think about that. Almost $30 billion more was lost than was actually made from the casinos. The lack of funding and the government being behind has a much bigger effect than you might think. For example, treatment centers are behind as well. They're in catch-up mode. The reality is that not everyone who works in addiction treatment understands gambling. When a gambler walks into a treatment center and begins to talk about their experiences with sports books or online casinos, the clinician might not understand the language, the drive, or the compulsion. The same goes for most family members. This makes it harder for your loved one to be honest, whether it be with their treatment providers or with their family. They might hesitate to open up because they're talking to someone who's never experienced this form of addiction themselves. And that's why it's so important to have a deeper understanding of what gambling addiction really looks like, so you can more effectively communicate and resonate with your loved one. On a healthcare standpoint, my very first therapist only treated me for depression because I insisted I didn't have a gambling problem. Had he been able to ask the right questions, maybe that would have made the difference. Don't get me wrong, I recognize it was still on me to be forthcoming. And to give you background, I've completed an inpatient program, a PHP program, and an IOP program. I still continue with DBT therapy and GA meetings weekly. Throughout those programs, I've worked with several therapists, psychiatrists, etc., and not a single one was a gambler. And very few knew much about sports, which is totally fine. Even my buddies who gamble, I didn't really share anything with them because I didn't feel like I could. I didn't think they'd understand the grip because I know that they can gamble responsibly. But I can't tell you how isolating it was and how it made me not want to take my treatment seriously because they'll have no idea what I'm talking about. If you can talk the talk and understand what a gambling addict is talking about, they will feel more comfortable and more open. Finally, understanding gambling today requires a grasp of Gambling 101. Specifically the online nature of it. What used to be a visit to the casino, which don't get me wrong is still an issue by the way, is now a swipe on a phone screen. And not only is it easier to access, but it's also easier to hide. Social media plays a huge role here with influencers glamorizing gambling as a quick route to riches. Pay attention. And I never really noticed how often they advertise it, but you can't watch TV, drive on the highway, or walk down the street without seeing Jamie Foxx glamorizing gambling with BetMGM. And I even recently saw an ad that was in the form of a cartoon with The Rock convincing someone to gamble. The man said, "I only have $300 left." And The Rock replied with, "That's okay. When you make your first deposit, we'll give you a $1,500 bonus." Now, we don't have to be marketing experts to see the message. Gambling is cool. And The Rock, this big muscular figure, essentially intimidates this man. This creates a whole new layer of complexity when it comes to treatment and family providing support. You have to understand how this works in order to resonate and connect with your loved one effectively. It's not just about stopping the bet, it's about understanding the whole culture, the apps, the community, and how these factors influence behavior. Understanding gambling culture is one of the most important pieces of gambling because it's evolved from a solitary activity to a social identity marker among peer groups. Friends don't just gather to watch games anymore. They gather primarily to bet on it. So understanding the culture is crucial. For example, I was recently at one of my favorite wing spots in Chicago, and they have several TVs that were playing the Cubs game and the Stanley Cup Finals were on. A table behind me of 6 men in their 20s weren't paying attention to any of the TVs. They were all huddled up around a cell phone watching a game and going nuts after whatever happened. Clearly, they had been betting on it. Now, imagine being the guy who is trying to stop gambling in that group or knows that they have a problem. Think about the pressure he must be feeling to want to join in on the action. Again, gambling has become a status symbol within peer groups. I'm excited to share that today I'm about 15 months bet free. My last bet was 4/16/24. I still attend weekly GA meetings and see a therapist who specializes in DBT and actually understands gambling, plus an additional therapist. I also manage my own social media platforms on TikTok and Instagram and manage a Discord with 400 people that seems to be growing by the minute. These all play a huge role in my recovery. In fact, sharing my story and being open for the first time in my life, especially on a public platform, has been such a great feeling because I know there's others like me who don't know where to go and don't know what to do. I have two missions in my life. One, be the best father to my daughter, and two, help as many people as I can by any means necessary. As we move forward in this course, my goal is to help you see gambling addiction through the lens of a gambler, so you can better understand, empathize, and ultimately help those struggling. Whether you're a peer or a family member, knowing the full picture is the first step in truly making a difference. Let's dive in. Welcome to Module 2, What Gambling Looks Like in 2025. In this module, we're going to explore how gambling has evolved over the years, especially in the realm of sports betting, online casinos, and the rise of new technologies that have reshaped the industry. It's essential to understand not only the history, but also how the gambling experience today is drastically different from what we might think of when we hear the word gambling. First, let's talk about the evolution of gambling. It wasn't too long ago that gambling was mainly about casinos or Vegas trips or betting on the occasional horse race. But fast forward to today, and we have a completely different landscape. Sportsbook apps like DraftKings, FanDuel, and BetMGM have taken over, allowing people to place bets on everything from a simple game to micro bets on specific events like the next pitch in a baseball game being a ball or a strike, or the number of fouls in a quarter of basketball. Then there's the world of crypto casinos, which offer entirely digital currencies in anonymity, making it even harder to track spending. There's also endless access by way of streaming sites. It used to be that you would only bet on the games you could watch on TV, but now with streaming sites, you can download ESPN Plus and watch any obscure college basketball game that you can imagine. You can even play online blackjack with a live dealer streaming. They are actually flipping physical cards. It gives you everything that's the feel of going to a real casino while you sit on your couch. My sponsor is 65 years old and he's an absolutely amazing person. A lot of our conversations sound like back in my day, we used to walk uphill to school both ways in the snow because we are on such different wavelengths for gambling. He actually volunteers for the gambling hotlines and was shocked to hear how much it's changed because when he was in action, he used to go to the racetrack and give his bookie hand signals to let him know what horse he wanted or whatever other bet he might take. It was much more limited and you had to be in person. Now it's all about micro betting and it's digital and it's anonymous. It's not just about gambling anymore. The rise of social media has created a whole new culture around gambling. Platforms like Twitter and Instagram have influencers that glamorize gambling, with many sharing their huge wins or huge parlay bets, creating a dangerous sense of excitement and FOMO. This level of accessibility and normalization has made gambling more embedded in daily life than ever before. Again, in recent years, it's become more than just a private or underground activity. It's mainstream, highly public, and often tied to celebrity culture. One of the most significant trends in modern gambling is the involvement of celebrities in promoting casinos and gambling platforms. This is no longer just about advertisements on TV or sponsorship deals during sporting events. Today, celebrities are directly engaging in gambling with their live streams showcasing high stakes bets and spreading the appeal of online casinos. One prominent example is Drake, who reportedly has a $100 million partnership with the gambling platform Stake. As part of this deal, Drake has been streaming his live gambling sessions to millions of followers. These streams often involve him placing absurdly large bets, sometimes millions of dollars, on various things like sports, slot machines, and roulette, all while displaying the casino's logo prominently in the broadcasts. Here's how those influence gambling culture. We now have a normalization of high stakes gambling. When you see celebrities like Drake casually betting massive amounts of money, it makes gambling appear glamorous, acceptable, and part of the celebrity lifestyle. This creates a dangerous association for viewers, particularly young people, who may see gambling as just another form of entertainment or a quick way to make money. There's a massive influence on younger audiences. Celebrities are extremely influential, especially among younger generations. With their massive social media followings and access to platforms like Twitch, YouTube, and Instagram, they are normalizing gambling in a way that was not possible in the past. This makes it easy for people to see gambling not as a vice, but as an entertainment experience they can enjoy and aspire to. Again, social media plays a huge role in this. These platforms have given celebrities a direct line to their audience. Many of these celebrities don't just promote gambling, they actively gamble live in front of their followers, creating a sense of intimacy and real time excitement. This live streaming makes the experience more accessible and engaging, giving viewers the sense that they too can participate in these high stakes bets. We have to be mindful of the danger of glamorizing gambling. These types of streams can make gambling addiction seem like a normal part of life, especially when they're paired with luxury lifestyles and celebrity endorsements. As viewers watch celebrities enjoying the thrill of high risk gambling with seemingly no consequences, they may be more likely to impulsively join or reinforce their own gambling habits without understanding the risks involved. Remember, your loved one might be sitting at home trying to quit gambling and casually checking on the photo that they posted of their little family and scroll their Instagram feed and get hit with gambling ads left and right, as well as influencers showing crazy wins. Fun fact for you all, most state gaming councils or gaming commissions that are designed to help people stop gambling are actually funded with casino profits, which limits their actual messaging. It's almost impossible to escape advertisements. Now, let's dive into the psychology behind why so many people are drawn to gamble today. The internet and these apps have created a perfect storm for addictive behavior. Gone are the days of walking into a casino and placing a bet in person, or at least for the most part. Now, anyone can open an app and start betting from the comfort of their home, while commuting, while showering, while giving their child a bath, all things that I've done. There's a constant stream of opportunities, new bets, promotions, and boosts. As I said earlier, it also used to be that you'd normally only bet on games that you could watch. And now with illegal streaming sites, you can watch literally anything, whether it's soccer in Bulgaria or a tennis match in Africa. There's also thousands of online casinos out there for your typical table games. Again, they have live blackjack where a real dealer is being streamed and dealing physical cards. Gambling today isn't just about the bet itself, it's about the instant gratification that comes with it. When people win, they get a surge of dopamine. And when they lose, they often find themselves trying to chase that feeling of excitement by doubling down. These apps are designed to create a feedback loop. The more a person bets, the more they're encouraged to bet again. Let's break down how these apps hook users. The apps today are built to keep you engaged. They use push notifications or alerts that pop up on your phone reminding you of a big game, a special offer, or a bet that's about to start. You even get notified whenever a team scores, the score at the end of the quarter, if it's a close game at the end, and of course, the final score. They also use something called gamification, making betting feel like a game rather than something that can lead to financial ruin. For example, the idea of earning loyalty points for betting or receiving a free bet after losing is an attempt to hook the user. We'll get into micro betting as well, but these apps work more like slot machines than a sports book with how quickly a bet can be settled. Again, you can bet on the coin toss of a football game, who wins the tip off in a basketball game, whether the next pitch will be a ball or a strike, if Steph Curry will make or miss his next shot, or whether his next point will be a 2-pointer, a 3-pointer, or from free throws. For the gambler, this isn't just about placing a bet. It's about staying in the loop, getting rewards, and unfortunately, reinforcing the cycle of addiction. The apps are engineered to keep users engaged for as long as possible. For one sportsbook, I actually earned top tier status. I had my own VIP host who offered me a portion of my losses back each week in the form of bonus bets. And the rewards were incredible. I'm not talking a new toaster like grandma gets when she goes to the casino. I'm talking Rolex watches, custom fitted golf clubs, all expense paid trips to Italy to go truffle hunting, 12-month leases on BMWs, the whole nine. One of the most crucial parts of understanding modern gambling is realizing how a gambler sees their bets. It's not just about a simple wager on a game, it's an entire mental and emotional process. Gamblers often justify their behavior with phrases like, I'm just trying to break even, or it's just a unit, which is a way to track wins and losses and a confidence metric for how much you wager on a game. For example, a unit can be any number. Let's call it $100. You can bet as many units as you'd like, but generally people will do a 1 to 5 unit scale. So a standard game will be 1 unit, so you bet $100. And a 5 unit play might be a max bet for you, so it would be a $500 bet. Units sound harmless, but it's part of the self delusion that keeps them stuck in the cycle. It's no different than using poker chips at a casino. It desensitizes you from the real value of what you're betting. What feels and sounds worse? Losing a $500 bet or losing a 5 unit bet? It also brings anonymity amongst friends. For example, me and my buddy might bet on a game for 5 units, but his unit might be $10 and mine is 100. So he bet 50 and I bet 500. He'd never know I might have a gambling problem based on that. Semi tongue in cheek, but the worst was when you and a friend bet opposite sides and knew he only had a few dollars on the game and you had your rent money on it, and he would talk smack about his bet winning. It wasn't a fun experience for what should have just been friendly banter, but ultimately was intense shame. Gamblers start to see their bets as investments, even when they're not. They rationalize and convince themselves that if they place just one more bet, they'll get back to even. The reality is, this mindset only leads to bigger losses and greater risk. And when the losses pile up, the gambler often doubles down, thinking that this time it'll be different. With gambling apps, the risk is that people can access their betting accounts at any time, whether they're in line at the grocery store, on the bus, or during a meeting, or in the middle of the night when they can't sleep. The constant availability makes it easy for gamblers to act impulsively without thinking about the consequences. In the past, gambling required a physical space and planning. It was a lot harder to sneak off to the casino for 4 hours when you have a newborn baby at home. Now it's about making quick decisions in the moment. This access leads to significant problems, especially in environments like workplaces, schools, or even family gatherings where people may be gambling in secrecy. And of course, there's so many events that revolve around sports. It's a tradition in my family that everyone watches the NFL games on Thanksgiving or the college bowl games on New Year's Day. When I was hiding my gambling, I'd go to the bathroom several times to check scores and place bets at dinner. In fact, I'd purposely suggest restaurants that I knew would have TVs for date nights so I could follow along without being discovered. I wouldn't be nagged about being on my phone. The level of secrecy is a huge part of the problem. Gamblers can be actively engaging in this behavior while looking completely fine on the outside. Typically, you'll notice if someone's drunk or high, but unless a gambler lashes out, you'll never know they just lost every penny they had during dinner. In this module, we've covered how gambling has evolved in 2025 and how it's become more than just a pastime. It's an addiction hidden in plain sight. Whether it's through mobile apps or the normalization of gambling on social media, the environment today is set up to make gambling easy, exciting, and all too accessible. As we move forward, we'll dive deeper into the mindset of the gambler and the behavioral traps that contribute to this addiction. Understanding these shifts is key to being able to recognize and relate to gambling addiction. The more understanding you have of this, the more you'll be able to relate and help out your loved one. In Module 3, The Language of Gambling, we'll dive into specific language that gamblers use and how this language serves as a reflection of their addiction. Gambling has its own vocabulary, and understanding these terms is essential for professionals or family members who want to connect with gamblers, recognize their behaviors, and understand the self delusions that keep them stuck in the cycle. It's not just about what a gambler says, it's about what's hidden behind those words. It's important to be able to understand what it means when someone says, I had an 8-teamer to win $20,000 and I got backdoored on the last leg and it lost by the hook, or at least be able to understand some of that. Let's start with the vocabulary. Gamblers have a language all their own, and these words can often be a sign of how deeply they're entrenched in the addiction. Terms like tilt, units, parlays, boosts, and cash outs aren't just casual lingo, they reflect the mindset and coping mechanisms of the gambler. For instance, tilt refers to when a gambler is emotionally frustrated and makes impulsive, irrational bets. It's a sign that their emotions are taking over their judgment. Units, as we've touched on, are often used to measure the amount of money being bet. It might sound neutral, but it's a way of detachment, just like poker chips at a casino. It doesn't feel as real. When a gambler says, I'm just betting a unit, they're potentially downplaying the seriousness of their actions.
Parlays offer the fantasy of big wins but drastically lower the odds. It's not strategy, it's wishful thinking wrapped in math. Boosts are sportsbook traps. They look generous, but they drive action on things the gambler wasn't planning to bet on. And cash outs give gamblers the illusion of control, but most take the cash out just to gamble again right away. The takeaway here: if a client speaks fluently in this vocabulary, they're deep in it. These terms reflect not just behavior, but how they cope, detach, and rationalize. Let's break down a real statement you might hear from someone. I had an 8-teamer to win $20,000 and got backdoored on the last leg and lost by the hook. The translation: an 8-teamer means a risky 8-leg parlay, nearly impossible to win. Backdoored means a last minute loss, like a buzzer beater or a Hail Mary, that's usually blamed on bad luck. The last leg plays into the near miss effect, which actually reinforces the desire to gamble because they were oh so close. And then there's lost by the hook, a half a point. It means they didn't cover the spread by half a point. It gives the gambler that I should have won feeling. The emotional takeaway: they focus on how close they were and not how reckless the bet was. And that $20,000 payout, that's the fantasy. They're chasing that win to solve everything. For family members, every word here reveals deeper thinking errors. Listen closely, because these phrases are the breadcrumbs that lead to understanding the gambler's mindset. Then there's the term retirement. You'll often hear gamblers say, I'm retired from betting, aka I'm taking a break. But what they really mean is that they're not betting today for whatever reason, which more often than not, it means that they don't have any money to deposit, but they'll be back tomorrow. Retirement is just a temporary escape, not a real change. It's part of the self delusion that keeps them in the cycle. It's meant to be the cool way to tell your buddies that you're not betting while still hiding the severity, as opposed to being upfront and saying, I think I have a problem. That doesn't mean we don't want to stop. We just think we can't. Most gamblers know this story. They've stopped for a few days, no apps, no casinos, and then they had the worst day at work, or something small like being cut off on the road. They might stop to get gas, and the gas stations have slot machines now. Where I live, every gas station within 30 miles has them. I actually remember the other day getting gas after dropping my daughter off at daycare at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, and there were 5 people sitting there playing slots. Or for me as a sports bettor, I'd just re download the apps and create a new account. They also have a slew of sayings that fall into the social aspect of it all, but ultimately is really just a way to justify betting more. For example, life's too short to bet the under, implying betting the under in a game is less exciting. Or hungry dogs run faster, meaning betting the underdog is the correct bet because they have something to prove, which has no statistical impact whatsoever, but it's fun. Or I'm only one win away from being back. Sharp money never sleeps. Fade the public, which means you bet against the average Joe because they're suckers. Or my personal favorite, the gambling gods will reward me. Or this time it'll be different. Casino gamblers are the exact same. We also have to understand micro betting because it's a fast dopamine loop. It's not just sports betting, it's a digital slot machine in your hand. Micro bets offer instant results, betting on whether the next pitch will be a ball or a strike, Steph Curry's next shot type, the speed of the pitch, or if a batter will make contact. This creates a slot machine effect: fast results, fast dopamine, no time to think. Compared to traditional sports betting where a game takes hours, you go from one bet to the next in seconds. This constant feedback loop actually rewires your brain. Gamblers are rewarded neurologically dozens, even hundreds of times per game. Each microbet is a neurochemical hit that deepens addiction. Now let's talk about the behavioral traps hidden within these phrases. The language used by gamblers is often a way of masking the reality of their behavior. When they say things like, I'm just trying to get back to even, they're justifying escalating their bets after a loss, hoping to recoup that money. This is a classic example of the gambler's fallacy, the belief that future bets are influenced by past outcomes. In reality, each bet is independent, but gamblers convince themselves that this time will be different. The irony is that it can lead to larger wagers on a so-called safe bet where the odds are much higher and the payout is lower. For example, it could be something like betting on Steph Curry to make one or more three-pointers in a game where you might bet $400 to win only 100. So if you lose it, a loss hurts really bad, but the win doesn't really do much for you. By the way, he accomplished this in 268 consecutive games. I know this statistic all too well because the one game he didn't do it, I had bet on it. And the funny part is, I used to never make those kinds of bets, but I was looking for action, so I had to do it, and I got burned. Another trap that we've touched on quite a bit is it's just a unit. Again, it sounds harmless, right? But in reality, it's a way of detaching from the emotional and financial consequences of gambling. By quantifying bets as units, they remove the human aspect of it. They don't see the dollar signs, they just see numbers on a screen. This detachment makes it easier to gamble larger amounts of money without feeling the weight of the decision. Let's not forget about the financial delusions that come along with this language. Taking out 1000% interest payday loans, borrowing from friends, or even dipping into retirement funds are common behaviors among gamblers, all justified by phrases like, I just need to win this back. They'll say things like, I'll be okay once I have this next big win. But this never happens. Instead, they dig themselves into a deeper hole financially and emotionally. On a rare occasion where they do get out of a hole, they'll use that as justification to continue betting and find themselves in the same vicious cycle. It's called end stage gambling. We don't stop gambling until our account hits zero. Even if we cash out some of the money, we'll likely just deposit it later that day or over the next few days. Honestly, the only time I really felt relief from gambling is when my account was at $0 and I had no access to money for a few days. Of course, I still had the anxiety of not being able to bet, but it was better than being a nervous wreck that felt every bet was literally life and death. The language of gambling addiction is a form of denial, a way to avoid facing the reality of what's happening. And for those who are trying to help a gambler, recognizing this language is crucial. It's a sign that they're trapped in the cycle and need to be approached with empathy and understanding. I used to constantly get offered box seats to games or concerts, private dinners hosted by famous chefs, and I never chose to go for two reasons. The first is that they always offered a plus one, and if I brought someone, they'd ask too many questions. How did you get the tickets? How much did they cost? And really, I'd be found out if they turned around and saw the giant DraftKings logo in the box. And secondly, I wanted the face value of those tickets in the form of free bets instead. At one point, I had received an iPad as a reward from a sportsbook app, and I repackaged that as a birthday present for a friend, and my wife asked me why I spent so much money on it. I just lied and told her I won it in a work raffle because I didn't want to tell her the reality. I went to insane depths to hide my gambling. But the interesting part is because I had access to these events and whatnot, I actually felt like I was living that lifestyle. Like I could afford box seats at a Cubs game, but in no way, shape, or form could I. And if I did actually go, it would have been like paying 10x for the actual tickets if you accounted for my losses. This level of deception really took a toll on me as I had this intense and immaculate web of lies that I had to maintain until it all came crashing down. In this module, we've explored the language of gambling and how it reflects the inner workings of the addiction. From terms like tilt and units to the self delusions that gamblers create to justify their behavior, this language is a powerful tool that can help us understand where the gambler's mind is. By recognizing these words and phrases, we can begin to see past the surface and start to understand the psychological traps that are keeping them stuck in the cycle. In the next module, we'll dive deeper into the psychology of gambling, understanding the biochemical rewards and how the behavior of chasing losses becomes ingrained. But for now, remember, the words gamblers use tell us a lot more than they realize. Pay attention to the language and you'll gain a deeper insight into the mind of a gambler. In Module 4, The Psychology of Gambling, we're going to dig deep into the core psychological drivers behind gambling behavior, those internal forces that create the compulsions, justifications, and self deceptions that keep a gambler trapped. Understanding these psychological factors is crucial because it explains why gambling becomes an addiction and why the cycle is so hard to break. We'll cover the psychology of chasing losses, how dopamine plays a central role in the addiction process, and how cognitive distortions like the gambler's fallacy keep individuals stuck in a loop of irrational thinking and escalating behavior. Let's start with one of the most significant and damaging behaviors in gambling addiction: chasing losses. This is the compulsion to continue gambling after a loss in order to recoup money that's been wagered. It's rooted in a belief that winning is the only way to regain control and eliminate the discomfort caused by loss. When a gambler loses, there's a sense of emotional pain, frustration, and often humiliation. The more they lose, the more determined they become to win it back, not realizing that this compulsion leads to even bigger losses. This phenomenon is similar to what's known in addiction theory as loss aversion. Chasing losses is just another cycle. We lose and experience emotional pain and then increase our stakes to recoup or even take riskier bets with bigger payouts, only to find deeper losses. Chasing losses is a cornerstone of a gambling issue. When clients or family members describe this need, it signals they're in an emotional decision making phase. When family members describe this, it signals that they're in an emotional decision making phase and all logic has gone out the window. Loss aversion in gambling terms is known as rage betting. Essentially, the gambler's brain processes losses as more painful than the pleasure gained from winning. So the brain becomes fixated on the idea of recovering that pain. One of the interesting facets of rage betting is that it's not uncommon to doom scroll social media by searching for the game you bet on, especially if it lost on a crazy play, to see all of the other people equally as angry about it. In a strange way, it was somewhat comforting knowing that I wasn't alone. Imagine that. I felt alone with my friends and family because I had to hide my gambling, but I felt comfort with internet strangers solely because they also lost money on the game. I guess misery truly does love company. Michael Jordan has a famous quote when asked about having a gambling problem. He says, "I don't have a gambling problem, I have a competition problem," which is very interesting to read. When I look back on my gambling days, the early days of it were the mentality of it's me versus the sports books because I wanted to win money. Then came a psychological shift, and most gamblers experience this. Eventually, gamblers will turn to a mindset of me versus the sports book or casino to a me versus me. Towards the end, I didn't care if I won or lost all that much. I just wanted to prove to myself that I could actually gamble responsibly. I'd tell myself that I'm smarter than the books and casinos, especially when it comes to college football because of my background. I know the X's and O's better than some bookmaker. It's the same concept as Jordan's competition problem, and a lot of times I was right. However, the bookmaker was way smarter than I was when it came to what the conspiracy theorist in me is calling the psyop. Because I was competitive, I wouldn't walk away after a loss or slow down when I was on a winning streak. And when I was on a winning streak, I thought I'd never lose. The irony is that by the end of my gambling days, the competition wasn't me versus the sports books. Again, it was about me proving to myself that I could finally control the gambling. I didn't care if I won or lost. I just wanted to show myself I could manage it, and I never learned how. The quote unquote psyop was so powerful that I effectively forgot I was playing against the house and really just playing against my inability to control my gambling. But here's the trap: the more a gambler chases those losses, the further away the win becomes. Instead of simply stopping and cutting their losses, they double down, betting larger amounts in hopes of recouping their previous losses. Again, this is the loss chasing cycle, and it leads to progressively higher stakes and more destructive behavior. The emotional state of chasing losses clouds rational judgment, turning gambling into a compulsion rather than a choice. Chasing losses is what keeps gamblers trapped in an ongoing cycle where the losses increase while the rationalization continues to grow. This dynamic is incredibly difficult to break because the emotional need to get even overrides logical thinking, even when the odds are against the gambler. Now let's explore the role of dopamine, the brain's feel good chemical. Dopamine is essential in the reward system, and its release is a key motivator in addiction, including gambling addiction. It's what drives the desire to gamble in the first place, and it's what makes gambling so addictive. Whenever a person places a bet, especially when they win, their brain releases a rush of dopamine, creating feelings of euphoria and excitement. The surge of dopamine is reinforcing, which is why the gambler wants to chase that feeling again. The problem is, gambling is designed to create a near constant stream of dopamine responses, especially with the rise of online sports betting and micro betting apps. Interestingly enough, whether a bet wins or loses, the brain still gets activated the same way, so you start to detach from the actual result. You just want the action. Technology has only amplified this with 24/7 accessibility with the mobile and online casinos, so it's removed the natural stopping points that exist with traditional gambling. There's instant results that could eliminate waiting periods and the explosion in popularity of microbetting. Modern gambling platforms are expertly designed to maximize dopamine release frequency, mimicking the reinforcement behavior of slot machines, for example. These apps exploit this reward cycle by offering instant gratification. Gamblers are no longer waiting for a single bet to play out for hours or days. There's 24/7 accessibility, and now with microbetting, every single play, every pitch, every pass in a game becomes an opportunity to trigger that dopamine response. Take baseball, for example. There might be 300 some pitches in a baseball game. And if you can bet on every pitch, whether it's a ball or a strike, that's an opportunity to bet 300 times and get 300 different hits of dopamine. For the gambler, it's not just about winning, it's about the thrill of the game and the expectation of winning. This is why even losing bets can trigger dopamine, because the gambler believes that the next bet will be the one that pays off. It becomes a continuous cycle of highs and lows where the brain constantly seeks that next rush. One of the most important facets of this is the near miss, which activates reward pathways similar to actually winning. I'm sure you've heard the saying, close but no cigar. That's exactly what the near miss is, and it creates a powerful incentive to continue betting. The danger of this cycle is how well it's engineered to keep people hooked. When someone wins, they're rewarded with a dopamine spike. But when they lose, they still had that dopamine spike during the bet, and this frustration drives them to try again, hoping that next time they'll hit the jackpot. These apps don't just give them a game, it gives them a feeling. And that feeling, that craving for more, becomes the addiction. Another psychological driver we need to dive into is the gambler's fallacy. This is one of the most powerful and irrational cognitive distortions that keeps gamblers stuck in the addiction. It's the belief that past events influence future outcomes in games of chance, even when they don't. For example, if a roulette wheel lands on black 5 times in a row, a gambler might believe that red is due to appear next. Or they may think the coin has come up heads 5 times in a row, so the next flip is almost certainly tails. Or in sports betting, this team has covered the spread 5 times in a row. People will even get more granular, like this team has covered every game for the last 10 years in September when they play at home and the temperature is above 70 degrees and the wind speed is under 15 miles an hour. I'm truly not kidding. And if you have any logic, a 10-year period is so wild to look at because each year the teams and players are different, but a gambler will use this as a reason to bet. Inherently, I knew every outcome is independent, but I was looking for something to justify a reason to bet on the game. And then I told myself it made sense. This belief is based on the fallacy that randomness is somehow cyclical and that the past influences the future. In reality, this is a fallacy. Each spin of the roulette wheel or each flip of the coin is independent of the one before it. The odds don't change based on the outcome of the previous bet, but gamblers who believe in this fallacy will continue to gamble with the conviction that the odds are in their favor, which only encourages them to make larger and riskier bets. The gambler's fallacy is not just about miscalculating odds. It's a symptom of a deeper need to rationalize the addiction. Gamblers are trying to find a pattern in a world that is entirely random. This belief that they can control or predict outcomes keeps them locked in the cycle, perpetuating the belief that they are just one bet away from winning it all. Another crucial psychological driver is the compulsion to bet. This is where gambling moves from being a choice to becoming an addiction. The compulsion is driven by the brain's need for excitement and reward, and as gambling becomes a habit, the person feels an overwhelming urge to place bets even when they don't want to. One of the key aspects of this compulsion is that it's no longer about the desire to win money. It's about the experience itself. The rush, the excitement, the emotional highs and lows become the primary motivation. Even when the gambler knows they shouldn't be betting, the brain's addiction to the experience makes it nearly impossible to stop. And in the digital age, the accessibility of gambling makes it even more difficult to break free from this compulsion. Gamblers are no longer restricted to specific locations like casinos or racetracks. They can gamble anytime, anywhere, on their phone, in their living room, or even during work breaks. Or in my case, while driving. And I don't mean that I just had a live bet going on. I would actually stream the game on my phone and watch it. This constant availability feeds the addiction, and the impulse to gamble becomes harder and harder to resist. Many gamblers set rules for themselves as a way of managing their behavior, rules that seem logical and responsible on the surface. These rules are an attempt to create some boundaries around their gambling, but often they're part of the same cycle that traps them. The problem isn't just that the rules get broken, it's that they are often self serving and designed to justify the continuation of gambling. Looking at a few common ones like one bet a day, this rule is designed to limit the amount of gambling in a day. It sounds like a good way to control impulsive behavior. However, the problem is once a gambler places that one bet, their mind is already invested in it. If they win, they're excited, but if they lose, they often feel compelled to make it back. In many cases, the single bet rule isn't a solution, it's just a temporary restriction. Then you have win loss limits. Many gamblers set a win or loss limit to stop gambling when they reach a certain point, like if they win $500, or they'll stop if they lose $200. The idea is to set boundaries to prevent excessive loss or to leave on a high note. But here's where the trap lies. The moment they hit either the win or loss limit, they often feel justified in breaking the rule. Well, I've already lost $200, what's another 50? Or I'm up $500, but I could be up more. These limits are flexible in the mind of a gambler, and the rules are often broken to chase the next high. However, that's dangerous because many times for me, I was $50 away from my limit, and then I lost $1,000 trying to win 50. There's also chasing the streak. Many gamblers set a rule that they'll only bet heavy if they're on a winning streak. Again, it sounds logical. They want to capitalize on momentum, but here's the catch. When they lose, they often convince themselves that that streak is just around the corner or that the loss was just an anomaly and they're still hot. I've been lucky lately. This is just one hiccup. This thinking makes it difficult to break free as they ride the emotional highs of streaks and fall into deeper cycles of hope and loss. Then you have the only bet what you can afford to lose rule. This rule is often seen as the responsible one. The idea that you only gamble with money you can afford to lose, ensuring you never risk more than you can handle. While this sounds responsible, it can often be a justification for more reckless behavior. The gambler may convince themselves that since the money is disposable, they can keep going after losses. The rule doesn't address the underlying emotional need to keep gambling, and it's often used to justify placing larger bets or continuing after significant losses. There's a few other ones like just one more bet, and this one's really common and dangerous. After a loss or a win, the gambler convinces themselves that just one more bet will turn things around. It's a rule based purely on emotion. And then lastly, you might bet certain game slates. This is a common self imposed rule to only bet during specific times or games. For example, someone might say on NFL Sundays, I'll only bet on one early game, one afternoon game, and one primetime game. The approach is designed to avoid placing a bet on every game, but it creates a sense of control that isn't grounded in reality. If that first bet wins or loses, the gambler might feel a pull to bet on other games anyways. The reasoning, again, is just one bet won't hurt. It's an illusion. The gambler is still dictated by the emotional highs of betting, even if they think they're limiting it. These rules sound responsible. They offer a sense of control and structure, but ultimately they're part of the illusion of control that gamblers create for themselves. The truth is, addiction doesn't follow rules. It follows emotion, compulsion, and a need for constant validation. Even when these rules are set with good intentions, they don't address the root of the addiction or compulsion, the need for the emotional rush, the dopamine hit, and the urge to escape. As I said earlier, I was self medicating with gambling for my depression by putting a band aid on a cut that I didn't know existed. The gambler is still trapped by their desire to get back to even and the need to chase that high or the fantasy that the next bet will be the one that turns everything around. In the end, these self imposed rules are just a way of rationalizing the addiction. They give the gambler a false sense of control while the addiction quietly reinforces itself. But as you can see, these rules are often self delusional and are just another way for the addiction to persist. The gambler's behavior is driven by emotion, not logic, and these rules don't break the cycle, they merely redirect it. Recognizing these rules is important because they give us a window into the thought patterns and justifications gamblers use. They are often not as much about control as they are about rationalizing continued gambling behavior. Let me give you an example of a common psychological trap gamblers fall into. One that shows just how distorted our thinking can become when we're in the heat of the moment. Imagine you're at the casino and you start with $1,000 at the blackjack table. You get on a little run and your stack grows to $1,900. Now, logically, you should walk away because you're up $900, but instead you keep playing. And of course, what happens? Eventually you lose, and now you walk away with $1,200. You're still up, but you're angry because you were once up $900 and now you're only up $200. You feel frustrated and upset, even though you still have more than you started with. Now let's look at a different scenario. You start with the same $1,000, but this time you lose quickly, and you're down to your last $100. You should probably walk away at that point because you've already lost most of your bankroll. But you don't, and instead you keep playing and you go on another run. This time you claw back $800, so now you've got $900 total. And suddenly you're overjoyed. Even though you're still down $100 from where you started, you feel like you've won. This is a classic example of how our emotions play tricks on us. In the first scenario, even though you're up $200, you feel like a failure because you could have walked away with more. But in the second scenario, despite losing $100, you feel like a winner because you clawed some of it back. It doesn't make any logical sense, but the emotional highs and lows of gambling cloud judgment. This is what happens when gamblers are caught in the dopamine loops we discussed earlier. The highs and lows aren't about the actual money, and the gambler's brain becomes addicted to the feeling of recovery and the chase of winning back what's been lost, even if it means walking away with less than what they started with. There's a lot of people who aren't familiar with options trading, but they actually play a huge role in gambling addiction. For example, there is the GameStop phenomenon. In 2021, there is the GameStop short squeeze that became a social movement. It was attracting people with little trading experience, and like gambling, options trading involves chasing losses and taking increasingly risky positions to recover, fueled by the same dopamine rush gamblers seek. And again, this has social media influence. There's platforms like Reddit, TikTok, and YouTube, and they've transformed day trading into a spectacle. Live stream trading sessions create this illusion that everybody's winning, making speculative trading feel accessible and glamorous, just like celebrity gambling streams. Both traders and gamblers believe they can outsmart the system. With GameStop, many believed they could game the system, causing people to follow social trends rather than making rational decisions, identical to the gambler's fallacy of finding patterns in randomness. Options traders chase the same dopamine hit as gamblers, particularly with volatile stocks. The emotional drivers are identical: peer pressure, social validation, constant action, and the belief that beating the impossible odds is feasible, all amplified by social media echo chambers. When investing becomes indistinguishable from gambling, you're no longer a trader. You're a player at the world's largest casino. The psychology is the same: chasing losses, euphoric wins, and the constant belief that the next big trade will change everything. Finally, while the pursuit of wins and the craving for dopamine are powerful, the losses accumulate over time. And that's when the real psychological damage happens. Gamblers often experience intense emotional pain, guilt, and shame when they lose, which only reinforces the cycle of gambling. But here's the problem: the losses never get acknowledged in the same way. The gambler's brain often minimizes the emotional pain associated with losing and instead focuses on the next opportunity to win. This emotional disconnect is a crucial part of the addiction. Gamblers lie to themselves about the severity of their losses, telling them it's just a setback or I'll make it back tomorrow. But this denial prevents them from facing the real consequences of their actions. This disconnect from reality is what makes gambling so dangerous. The gambler may suffer financial ruin, damage relationships, and even risk their mental health, but they're still trapped in the cycle, unable to break free because the craving for that next dopamine hit is too powerful. To wrap up, the psychology of gambling addiction is driven by powerful emotional and cognitive forces. Chasing losses, dopamine loops, the gambler's fallacy, and the compulsion to bet all work together to create a feedback loop that keeps the gambler trapped in a cycle of self deception and escalating behavior. These psychological dynamics are what make gambling addiction so hard to overcome. It's not just about the money. It's about the brain's response to winning and losing, the emotional need to escape, and the irrational belief that just one more bet will turn things around. Understanding these mechanisms is key for any family member who wants to help their loved one because it helps you see the person behind the behavior. In this module, we're going to talk about one of the hardest parts of loving someone with a gambling addiction: the lying, the secrecy, and the manipulation. It's confusing and painful, and sometimes it makes you question your own reality. Let's be clear from the beginning: lying is a core feature of gambling addiction, not because the person is evil or broken, but because the addiction depends on secrecy to survive. Unfortunately, we have to accept that lying is a part of this. It's a core feature, not necessarily a character flaw. Gamblers don't lie because the person is evil or broken, but because the addiction depends on secrecy to survive. Without the lies, the addiction would be exposed and potentially stopped. So there's a psychological contradiction, because when someone's addicted to gambling, they often feel two things simultaneously: deep shame about what they're doing and a powerful compulsion to keep doing it anyway. Lying becomes the only way to manage this contradiction. It's also a protection mechanism for them. They lie to protect the addiction from being stopped, but they also lie to protect themselves from facing the full reality of their behavior, and also to protect you from seeing how bad it really is. The shame actually drives the secrecy. The more ashamed they feel, the more they hide. And the more they hide, the more they gamble to escape the shame. It creates a cycle of deception that becomes increasingly difficult to break. Just remember, the lies aren't personal, they're not about you. They're about protecting the addiction from being stopped and protecting themselves from the overwhelming shame of facing what's really happening. If you're ever wondering where the money went or how they keep funding the gambling, it's usually not as simple as draining a savings account. Most problem gamblers become experts in financial misdirection. And here's what that looks like in the real world. It might be payday loans because they're easy to get and even easier to hide because typically there's no credit check. Many take out multiple at once to pay off gambling debts or even chase losses. Then you have cash advance apps like Earnin, Dave, or Bridget to borrow from their next paycheck. You might not see it on a bank statement and it comes out automatically. Then we have credit card cycling, shuffling balances between cards or maxing one out and then opening another to cover bills. And we're all familiar with Venmo and Cash App and gift cards, where they're digital wallets and cash cards that become ways to move or store money without scrutiny. Some people use crypto accounts. They might use platforms like Coinbase not just to invest, but to gamble directly on crypto casinos or mask transfers. Some people will use prepaid debit cards that you don't know about. They use them to load gambling deposits without it hitting a primary account. And then, of course, the fake budgets or excuses. This was for bills. I had to fix the car. That charge isn't even mine. All ways to hide losses. Another big one is splitting up paychecks into secret bank accounts because you typically don't see that person's pay stub every time they get paid. I cannot emphasize this enough. Every member of your family should pay for additional credit monitoring and lock their gambler's credit so they can't pull out any loans. You may ask yourself, why would you need to lock your own credit? They will take out loans in your name. And I know this because I did it. If you're noticing constant financial stress, missing money, or strange gaps in explanations, those are red flags. For me, I ran a small business and I'd say I had no money because of a bad month, and I'd also take out business loans that nobody knew about. In reality, I had some of my best years ever in the height of my gambling, but I was living paycheck to paycheck, and it was the lie that I told myself. In terms of financial deception, the excuses are endless. Some of the common ones that you'll hear are, this was for bills, it's not my charge, I had to fix the car, work hasn't paid me yet. So, some of the red flags to watch for are things like constant financial stress despite stable income, missing money with vague explanations, changing stories about where money went, or new unexpected financial emergencies. I actually ran a small business and I'd tell my family I had no money because of a bad month. And then I'd take out business loans to cover expenses, which also got used for gambling. The reality is that I was having some of my best years ever, and I was making good money, but gambling it all away. The bad business was just my cover. Business owners, freelancers, or commission based workers have a built in excuse for irregular income. This makes their gambling easier to hide as they can blame market downturns, slow client payments, or business investments that didn't pan out. For families, the financial deception is often more elaborate than simply missing money. It's a crafted narrative designed to be just believable enough to avoid confrontation while hiding the gambling activity that's really draining resources. Let's talk about gaslighting. Gaslighting is when someone makes you question your perception of reality, either directly with something like, I didn't do that, or indirectly, like, you're overreacting, you're always so paranoid. A gambler may gaslight you in subtle or overt ways. Remember, we are elite liars. We could convince you the sky isn't blue just by denying it. You know the guys who run three-card monis on the streets in big cities? We are those people. We'd be the best politicians ever. We can spin like no other because we've already thought about the scenario, because we actually feel terrible about it. But we can't tell the truth, or that would expose us to our fears of being disowned or kicked out of the house, etc. And we're generally quick on our feet too, because on that drive back from the casino, we've already planned what we'll say. Or when we're up gambling at 3 a.m. and you're fast asleep next to us, we're already thinking about what we're going to say in the morning. We'll deny the obvious. Even when you've seen betting apps or missing money, they'll insist you're wrong. We flip the script. Why are you checking my bank account? Or you just don't trust me. And the worst is emotional guilt tripping. You think I'm a bad person. I already feel horrible. Why are you making it worse? This behavior doesn't mean they don't care about you. It just means they're trying to protect the addiction, avoid shame, and avoid consequences, even if it means bending your sense of reality. Remember, gambling thrives in isolation, and most gamblers will go to extreme lengths to keep it private. They'll hide about how often they bet and say things like, I only bet on the big games when they're really betting constantly. They'll lie about how much they've lost. My story was that I would either say I'm up or down $50, depending on when they ask, no matter what, because that's small enough to avoid questions. If you ask them how much they've borrowed before, they'll probably say they've never borrowed from anyone. If you ask them who they owe, they'll probably say nobody. And if they think that you're on to them, they'll give you a breadcrumb and say, oh, I do owe one friend actually. For example, after my family knew everything, I still tried to hide some of it. I told my family about some of the loans I took out, but I left three of them off. I knew they were out there, I just didn't want them to know. And they found out anyways, and it just made the problem worse. They'll lie about accounts that they've opened. So, again, for you, it's always trust but verify. If you know that they used to bank with US Bank, go with them or call the bank to get proof. Make them email their employer to confirm their check is not being split up or make them show you a pay statement. And they'll even lie about how close they are to a crisis. And you'll pick up on it. There will be little lies or a change in routine, irritability. Those are all little signs of a relapse or a big crisis getting ready to happen. They're often called addiction adjacent behaviors. Because remember, they might be gambling on breaks at work, late at night, or while sitting right next to you, all while pretending everything's fine. I used to work in finance and I'd be gambling while telling someone in a meeting about how their 401k was performing. And also remember, it's not because they want to hurt you. It's because they've lost control and hiding it is the only way to keep functioning, or at least pretending to be able to function. Being lied to, manipulated, and gaslit by someone that you love creates a lot of confusion like, why are they acting so normal if things are this bad? It brings on self doubt. Maybe I'm just being dramatic. Even anger. How could they do this to me? And then, of course, emotional exhaustion because you don't know what's true anymore. This is trauma. It's not just stress, it's a form of emotional abuse, even if unintentional. It's a play. The lie is intentional to hide and deceive. The hurt is not. I genuinely believed that I'd gamble my way out of it, and if they never found out about the lies, then it wouldn't hurt. Kind of like the whole if a tree falls in a forest, does it make a noise? Understanding that this is a symptom of addiction, not just a personality flaw, can help you respond with clearer boundaries instead of internalized blame. Some people will actually argue that gambling isn't the addiction, it's actually lying. For most addicts, lying is their first addiction. They'll lie about anything. I remember lying about what I'd eat for lunch for no other reason than I didn't want to hear about how I need to eat because I was losing weight or I need to be healthy. Most gamblers live in denial. Deny, deny until you die. They genuinely believe they can stop whenever they want. They truly think the next win will fix everything. And if they miraculously get that win, then they'll justify that to saying, well, I'm back to even so I can bet again. I've figured it out now. That's why they lie, not just to you, but to themselves. They believe, I'll win it back and fix it before anyone notices. Or I'm not that bad, I'm still paying the bills. For example, I was making six figures and was living paycheck to paycheck. Or I can quit when I want to, I'm just not ready yet. The self deception makes it nearly impossible for them to be honest with others. They don't see the full damage yet until it's too late. Denial is one of the most powerful defense mechanisms in addiction, and gambling might be the addiction where denial is strongest. Because unlike substances, there's no substance to point to. No needle, no bottle, no track marks, just a phone. But here's what denial really means. If I admit this is a problem, I'll have to give up the only thing that makes me feel okay. They're not just protecting the addiction, they're protecting their coping mechanism, the one thing that gives them a sense of hope, control, or escape. Gambling addiction rarely exists alone. One of the most important things to understand is this: gambling addiction is often not the only issue. It frequently co occurs with underlying mental health conditions that go untreated or unrecognized. According to multiple studies, up to 75% of people with gambling disorder also have a co occurring mental health diagnosis. 49% experience a mood disorder like depression or bipolar disorder. 41% struggle with anxiety disorders. 60% have a substance use disorder at some point in their lifetime. Suicidal ideation is alarmingly common. Gambling addiction has one of the highest suicide attempt rates of all addictions. For me, I don't know what came first, gambling or depression. What I know is that when I was gambling, it made my depression worse, and I was self medicating without knowing it. It didn't hit me until I went to treatment that gambling actually made me feel physically better. And of course, that was only during the bet. After it lost, I'd feel guilt and shame. Put it this way, gambling was the band aid for the cut of depression that I didn't even know existed. So here's what this means for families: the gambling is often just the surface problem. What's underneath could be depression, trauma, anxiety, ADHD, or unresolved grief, and your loved one may not even realize it. Many people are gambling to self medicate pain they can't name yet. That doesn't excuse the behavior, but it explains the urgency and emotional volatility behind it. This has been a heavy module, but it's one of the most important. If you've felt lied to, manipulated, or made to feel crazy, you're not alone, and you're not imagining it. This is the pattern. But now you can name it. You can stop internalizing it, and you can see it for what it is: a symptom of addiction, not a reflection of your worth. In the next module, we'll begin to shift the focus from what's happening to you to what you can do about it, how to respond without enabling, and how to protect your peace while staying grounded in reality. You're not powerless and you're not alone. Remember, gambling addiction isn't just a financial problem. It's a relational one because it fractures trust, warps communication, and pulls people apart. But it can be understood, and once it's understood, it can be confronted. You've already done one of the hardest things. You're facing the truth. Let's keep going. By now, you've probably heard all the advice. Just set boundaries, download a self exclusion app, let them earn back your trust. It sounds nice and it's certainly not bad advice, but it doesn't always work. Not when you're dealing with gambling addiction, and especially with modern gambling addiction. Because this isn't just a bad habit, this is an addiction with 24/7 access, infinite loopholes, and a brain that's rewired to hide, chase, and justify. So, in this module, we're going to walk through what actually helps, what doesn't, and how to set up systems that protect you, your money, and their recovery. Let's start here because this is the biggest vulnerability, and it's where most relapses start: by having access to money. This also will help limit the damage should a relapse happen. For starters, remove account access to any joint bank accounts, credit cards, debit cards, etc. If they have any cards in their name only, change the phone number and email to yours so they can't reset the password, and set every alert possible. If someone is in active addiction or early recovery, they cannot have unrestricted financial access. Not because they're a bad person, but because the addiction will use any open door to sneak back in. You'll have to monitor their income as well, so you'll want to change their direct deposits into a joint bank account so that you can see it and they cannot access it. This ensures their paycheck doesn't get used for gambling funds. Also, create an allowance system. Set up daily or weekly allowances, whether it be cash or a controlled debit card. Transfer funds only as needed for things like gas, lunch at work, etc. Another example would be using reloadable cards with controls. So cards like TrueLink or Greenlight offer spending controls and alerts. They can be preloaded with just enough for specific amounts while restricting ATM withdrawals and gambling transactions. Fair warning, this will probably be a fight. They'll say you don't trust me, but the truth is, trust has to be rebuilt over time with proof. Financial protection isn't control, it's a safety net that prevents larger losses and catastrophic relapses. Think of financial access like a house with 100 doors. Even if you lock the front door, they'll look for a window or a back door. So every door has to be locked. Here's how you do that. You'll want to freeze their credit with all three bureaus, so Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, so they can't open new loans or cards. Freeze your credit, which we've already touched on, and anyone else's they may have access to. Set up text and email alerts for every single transaction over $1 on all cards. Remove any digital wallets like Apple Pay, Google Pay, etc. And make sure your banking apps show real-time activity and check it regularly. Many banks offer instant notifications and suspicious activity alerts. Again, this isn't control, it's protection for them and for you. Here's why this all matters. I was about 7 months into recovery and I did this. I had an old job and I had an old pension account that my family didn't know about. I cashed it out. I didn't use it to gamble, but I just wanted to prove to myself and to them that I could have money and not use it. And when I got caught, I kept saying I'd close the account and transfer the money over Zelle to them. And then I made up some story about daily limits and the amount of transfers you can do in 3 days. And eventually I had to be walked into the bank and made to close the account with them and get a cashier's check and hand it over right away. These are known as addiction adjacent behaviors. That's how deep this goes. We will test boundaries even in recovery. We might have secret accounts, hiding financial information, or just keeping small pools of money that were all warning signs. Remember, we don't always relapse with a bet. Sometimes the relapse starts when we test limits or hide little things and say, they don't need to know about this one. That's why it always has to be trust but verify. Even deep in recovery, the addiction teaches gamblers to create just a little privacy with money. This isn't about moral failing, it's about a brain wired to protect its access to potential gambling funds. Verification isn't punishment. Again, most families think relapse equals placing a bet. That's incorrect. Relapse start when lies creep back in, when money doesn't add up, when behaviors shift, when excuses start stacking. Some of the early signs might look like your loved one being secretive or vague about finances. They may suddenly want more control of their paycheck. They may get defensive about micromanaging. They'll start telling half truths about how they're doing. And they'll say things like, I just want a chance to prove I can do it on my own. That's not growth. That's the addiction knocking on the door again. And once it's let in, it will burn the house down.
Let's clear the air. Here's what doesn't help. Not because it's bad advice, but because it's not enough. Just use Gamban or a self-exclusion app. These tools are well-intentioned, but easy to beat. Gamblers can factory reset their phone, make a new Apple or Google account, use a different device, switch to a browser instead of the app, use a VPN to spoof their location. They're not locks, they're speed bumps. That doesn't mean this shouldn't be used, but don't expect it to fix everything. They self-excluded from the casino. Again, self-exclusion can work for some, but it's riddled with loopholes. Let me give you a real story. I lost my wallet once. I went to a casino. My buddy got in and then passed his ID back to me in line. Fair warning, by the way, you can get arrested for attempting to enter a casino while self-excluded. But either way, I got in. It was no different than sneaking into a bar underage. Addiction finds a way. They self-excluded from the sportsbook apps. Here's something 99% of families don't know. Self-exclusion is tied to state licenses. So I live in Chicago. I self-excluded from Illinois sportsbook apps, but 30 minutes away, I could cross into Indiana, re-download the exact same app, log in, gamble again. So if you travel with someone to a state where it's legal, upon landing, make sure that they self-exclude from the apps there. Why is it like this? Well, because in Indiana, it's technically linked to a different casino license. So again, the app didn't stop me, the system didn't stop me, only accountability did. They said they're sorry and they're doing better. A sincere apology doesn't change the fact that the brain is still addicted. Even the most well-meaning gambler will fall back into old patterns without structure and oversight. Addiction recovery isn't built on promises. It's built on systems, consequences, and consistent accountability over months and years.
I often get asked, when do I give them more freedom? And there is no one size fits all answer, but I would say very slowly and after proof, not promises. Some timeline examples might look like this. For the first 6 months, no direct financial access ever. If they want to see account balances, show them your phone or computer. Passwords should all be changed. In the next 6 to 12 months, there can be limited access with complete visibility and strict controls. Any unexplained transactions end those privileges. And then for the next 1 to 2 years, maybe gradual restoration based on verified patterns of honesty, not just time passed. Protective systems are important. Again, it's about protection, not punishment. Maybe they get gambling full addiction access, systematically erodes. I know some people that didn't get full access even years into 5 to 7 years into recovery. So again, start with complete financial lockdown. Look for patterns of consistent honesty and use controlled cards with limits and monitoring. For example, I didn't regain access to my accounts for 9 months, and that was only because of a divorce. And even then, I gave my sister full visibility. Because again, we don't want to hurt you, but we need help protecting ourselves from ourselves. Helping someone recover from gambling addiction is not about pep talks or forgiveness. It's about tight structure, clear rules, and relentless accountability. Will it feel extreme? Yes. Will it cause tension? Probably. Will it protect them from relapse and you from heartbreak? That's the goal, but it's not a guarantee. But it will put you in the best position to avoid all of that. In the next module, we'll walk through the treatment options that are actually out there, what exists, what's missing, and how to navigate a system that's still catching up to the reality of modern gambling. You've come this far. Let's keep going one step, one boundary, one truth at a time. In Module 7, we'll walk through the treatment options that actually exist, like what's available for the person struggling and what's available for you. By now, you know how complex gambling addiction really is. It's emotional, it's financial, it's hidden, it's painful. And the question most families ask next is, okay, now what? Because here's the truth: you cannot recover for them, but you can help them find the support they need and get support for yourself too. And support doesn't mean sacrifice. You deserve help as well. The most extreme and frankly most expensive would be inpatient and residential treatment, which is structured 24/7 support for severe gambling addiction. And typically they'll work on covering other mental health issues as well. Inpatient is a live in facility where someone stays 24/7 for 30 to 60 days. And the programs include structured therapy, group sessions, financial counseling, and transition planning. This is most helpful for someone who's had a complete loss of control over gambling, suicidal thoughts or severe depression, multiple failed attempts to quit, and co occurring disorders that need treatment. Now, very few treatment centers specialize in gambling, so make sure you ask these questions. Do you treat gambling addiction specifically? Do your therapists understand online sports books and modern betting? How many gambling specialists are on staff? What gambling specific therapies do you offer? Again, some red flags to watch for. Very few treatment centers specialize in gambling, so beware of places that say we treat all addictions but can't explain their gambling specific programming or approach, or don't even screen for it. The right inpatient program can be life changing, but gambling expertise matters. Don't settle for a program that primarily treats substance abuse and then merely includes gambling as an afterthought. Once someone completes inpatient programs, they'll typically step down into a PHP or IOP program. However, you can start there as well. A PHP or partial hospitalization program is typically 5 days a week for several hours a day, and it's structured treatment. You get to live at home and you attend treatment throughout the day. Again, typically 6 hours or more. There's individual, group, and family sessions, and it's more intensive than an IOP program, but less than inpatient. Then there's IOP, intensive outpatient programs, typically 3 to 4 days a week for 2 to 3 hours a session. They'll focus on relapse prevention strategies, group therapy and peer support, life skills, and rebuilding relationships, and they can often continue with work or school while attending. These programs serve as crucial transitions in the recovery journey. Again, you'll want to continue treatment after inpatient when you step down from 24/7 care. You may also need treatment before inpatient if you're waiting for a bed. You may look at these options instead of inpatient when 24/7 care isn't needed or accessible. And then lastly, after the initial recovery, the goal is relapse prevention. Again, to reiterate, it is critical to ensure that there's gambling screening. Most programs don't automatically screen for it, so ask directly, do you have gambling specific modules? Will counselors understand sports betting or online casinos? And how many gambling clients have you treated? Individual therapy can also be incredibly effective and likely the most inexpensive, but only if the provider knows gambling. Of course, any therapy will probably be a good thing, especially if there's co occurring mental health issues, but nonetheless, you'll want to make sure that they have gambling expertise. So, again, asking them questions like, have you treated gambling addiction before? Are you familiar with online sports betting or gambling specific behaviors? From a best fit standpoint, you'll want to look at therapists who also work as addiction counselors or DBT/CBT trained providers, trauma informed therapists, or those who have lived experience or specific training in gambling. And yes, you as a family member can and often should seek your own therapist. Finding the right therapist may take time, but it's worth the effort. The connection between client and therapist is as important as their credentials. Don't just settle for someone who doesn't understand modern gambling. Finding a community is important when it comes to creating structure around gambling addiction so that your loved one can reach out and talk to people who live in their world. A very common one is Gamblers Anonymous, very similar to AA or NA. It follows the same 12-step fellowship program. It's also free. Meetings are typically in person or online, and it's actually a very welcoming community. If you live in Chicago and can't find an online meeting that fits your schedule, you'll be welcomed with open arms to a meeting in New York, for example. Some of the pros to this program is that it's very judgment free, there's structured accountability, and there's peer connection with others who get it. Some of the cons might be along the lines of the program feeling outdated to younger gamblers or app based bettors. For example, I'm the youngest person in my GA meeting. However, that's a positive for me, frankly, because I learned from experience. Also, depending on where you live, some areas lack strong local meetings, and it also heavily relies on self motivation. There's also another program called Smart Recovery, which is an alternative to 12-step programs. It's rooted in self empowerment and cognitive behavioral tools. It's ideal for people who aren't comfortable with the spiritual language of GA or want more structured, science based approaches. I'm a big proponent of going in person to meetings when you can, but again, if it doesn't work with your schedule, online is still great. If you're attending more than one meeting in a week, many people find a mix of both works best, especially when local meetings are limited. If you still experience friction with going to traditional meetings, there's also modern apps and online tools. That being said, I think these are a great addition to what they're already doing with some of the meetings. Because let's be clear, no app or subreddit can replace treatment. But these tools can help fill the gaps, provide community, and offer guardrails in early recovery. A really great app out there is called eVive. It's one of the most promising up and coming apps for gambling recovery. They're sponsored by multiple states, they offer personalized recovery tools, and it's becoming a major player in this space. It includes things like check ins for tracking urges, resources for finding treatment, education for gamblers and families, as well as accountability tools built for modern recovery. We've already touched on some of the gambling blocking apps out there that restrict access to betting apps and websites. Again, they're helpful but not foolproof. Anyone tech savvy can get around them, but they can buy time, reduce temptation, and add friction to relapse. Another great opportunity is Discord servers and Reddit communities. They are thriving online communities that offer real support. There's Discord servers that have daily check-ins, peer support, recovery chats. There's subreddits like r/problem gambling where people share stories, relapses, wins, and advice. There's close to 40,000 people there. These spaces can be a lifeline, especially when the gambler feels like nobody in real life understands what they're going through. And most people use social media already. You can find a lot of great people posting their story online. However, a word of caution with social media. It's a double edged sword. I post every day online, and you would think that posting about recovery would bring support, and it does, but sometimes. Here's what I learned from my experience. Most of the real support comes from direct messages because it's private and quiet for people who are also struggling and they're not public about it. But if you go to the comment sections, they can be pretty brutal. Most of the comments are going to be things like, you're just bitter because you lost, addiction's not real, just stop betting, one more big win and you'll change your mind, you're just a quitter. And that's how isolating this disease can be, even in recovery. So use social media for connection if it helps, but don't rely on it for validation. Stick with trusted communities, real people, and places where honesty is met with empathy, not trolls. It's also important to understand that there are options for you as family members and peers. You're not just a bystander in all this. You're often the one carrying the stress, confusion, and fear. That's why you need support too. A really great option is Gamanon. It's the family companion to Gamblers Anonymous. Gamanon's another 12-step support group for spouses, parents, siblings, and friends of someone with a gambling issue. And what you'll find there is other people who've lived this exact pain, tools for letting go of guilt and enabling, support for your emotional recovery, and you'll learn boundaries, not ultimatums. And for the record, I experienced friction with getting my own family to go to these types of meetings because their impression of it is what you see in movies where it's a bunch of sad people sitting in a circle. And it's truly completely the opposite of that. Yes, there's some sad stories, but it's community. It's resonating with other people that are experiencing similar problems, and it's honestly very supportive. I cannot reiterate this enough. Your own therapy matters, and your healing is just as important as your loved one who gambles. It's going to help with things like setting and maintaining boundaries, especially healthy boundaries with your loved one. You'll learn how to communicate limits clearly without guilt and how to enforce them with consistency, even when it's difficult. Therapy also provides a space to process the emotional manipulation that often comes with addiction. Rebuild your self trust and learn to recognize when your reality is being distorted. It's self care beyond the basics. Learn that taking care of yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Therapy can help you develop practical routines for emotional regulation, stress management, and rebuilding your own life outside the crisis. One of the other skills you'll learn is when to step in versus stepping back. One of the hardest skills is knowing when to intervene or when to let natural consequences unfold. Therapy helps you navigate this delicate balance without falling into enabling or abandonment. Even if your loved one refuses help, you still can and should seek support. Don't wait until you're completely exhausted. The earlier you get the help, the better equipped you'll be for this journey because your pain matters too. This is the final module, but it's not the end of your journey. You now know what gambling addiction really looks like. You've seen behind the curtain, you have the language, the insight, and the tools, and you're not walking into this blind anymore. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up. And thank you for doing the hardest thing of all, trying to understand. I just want to leave you with some final thoughts and what comes next. First off, you made it, and that alone says a lot. You've now completed a crash course in understanding something most families struggle with in silence for years: modern gambling addiction. You showed up, you stayed, and you learned. You sat through the hard truths. You've opened your mind to things that didn't make sense before. And maybe you've seen your loved one's behavior through a completely different lens. So let's take a moment and acknowledge that, because now you know what gambling addiction really is. Let's recap what you've learned. First, there's modern gambling reality. This is what gambling addiction looks like in 2025. Smartphones, apps, crypto, and dopamine loops, not just casinos anymore. How online platforms are engineered to be addictive. You've also learned about the language, terminology, and psychology that keeps gamblers stuck. How units, tilts, parlays, and boosts reflect deeper thought patterns, and about the self-justification that feeds addiction. We've learned how shame drives secrecy, lying, and manipulation, not because they're bad people, but because addiction needs hiding to survive. We've also learned about financial deception and emotional impact on families. We've touched on psychological drivers like chasing losses, dopamine loops, and cognitive distortions that drive the addiction. How online gambling eliminates natural stopping points, and the clawback effect in the competition mindset. We've also discussed real support systems and what actually works: locking finances, credit monitoring, and clear boundaries, not just self-exclusion apps or promises. And lastly, treatment navigation. The landscape of treatment options for both gamblers and family: inpatient, PHP, IOP, therapy considerations, GA/smart recovery, modern tools and apps, and the importance of family support. Let's pause for a second and say something you may have needed to hear for a long time. It's not your fault. You didn't cause this. You didn't enable it by loving them. You didn't fail them. You didn't miss some magical sign you were supposed to see. This addiction is manipulative, secretive, and designed to fly under the radar. Just like Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting, we're not just saying it, we mean it. It's not your fault. You cannot fix this for them, but you can support them, you can set boundaries, and you can give them structure. But again, you cannot do it for them. Recovery has to be something they choose again and again. All you can do is make sure the door is open and that you don't lose yourself while waiting for them to walk through it. You're not their savior and you're not their scapegoat. You're someone who loves them enough to learn the truth. And that's enough. Here are some things that actually help from a next step standpoint. Knowledge is power, but it's only as strong as what you do with it. Rewatch the most relevant modules when patterns start showing up again. Join a Gam-Anon meeting or find a therapist who works with families of addicts. Talk to your loved one using the language and insights you now understand. Set boundaries with clarity and not fear. And when in doubt, go back to trust but verify. If you're here, you're already ahead of 99% of families dealing with this. But if you want personalized help, someone to walk you through your specific situation, give feedback on your boundaries, help with accountability structures, or just be a sounding board from someone who gets it, I'm here. I offer one-on-one private sessions just for family members. I have to reiterate, this is not therapy, and it doesn't replace therapy. This is not generic advice. This is real talk, real strategy, and a chance to build a game plan that protects your peace while supporting their recovery. You don't have to do this alone. You never did. Again, thank you for showing up. The hardest thing you can do is try to understand, and you did exactly that. This is just the beginning, but you're no longer walking it alone. And always remember, there's strength in community and hope in understanding.